There we go. All right.
Well, well, well. Here we are.
Here we are.
Reconciliation. I, I looked up the definition of the word, and it means to bring together, to unite in the same spirit or feelings. So it's not exactly forgiveness per se, although forgiveness is an element of reconciliation. Reconciliation brings things back together again after they break.
Certainly, that is for me something that matters a great deal when I'm helping people who have come into conflict in the workplace. And it's it's a shame because I think a lot of it has to do with uh, we're like passing ships in the night sometimes when we communicate our styles. I recently had a fallout with someone whose communication style is radically different than mine, and I found it to be disrespectful, and I don't think he realizes that at all. And so I've got to find a way to reconnect with this person and help them understand my reaction. Because right now, I think they're feeling like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with Greg? So reconciling in that it can be difficult. Would you agree?
I think by nature it's difficult.
Yeah.
The reason we're attempting reconciliation or approaching reconciliation is because of some discomfort or some pain that we carry. Isn't it interesting that later in life people want to clean things up with relationships that have been damaged before, such as sibling conflicts?
Isn't it true? Isn't it true? Have you
Now,
found that in your own life as well? I have.
yes, absolutely, yes. I've also felt the urge in myself. It just seems natural, being an elder now, that I realized I had a conflict with my baby brother. I won't go into detail, but it was serious, and but it was decades ago and long forgotten. But in a recent conversation, he brought it up, and I really felt ashamed. I was wrong in the situation,
Huh?
and 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 he was pretty much just ignoring me. You know, the most painful thing you can do to someone, ignore them. So I brought it up, and we bled the pain out, and he explained his point of view, and I didn't have a cavil at all. It's just young and dumb and impulsive, and begged for his forgiveness and wept, and the
Wow.
relationship improved
Wow.
after that.
Wow. That's
It was
great.
it was good. Yes, it took a little bit of courage, um, but I've learned it was an influence I got from Dr. Tom Gordon from Leadership Effectiveness Training, which is if you feel something's not right in the relationship, bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oftentimes, there are more problems created by things not being addressed or what's unsaid than what's said. So I remember as a younger man, I was a chef at the Cobian restaurant in Boulder, Colorado, and I had someone under me, and I kept giving them orders. And there was a noisy kitchen, of course, stainless steel banging, and the waitress is screaming, and the dishwasher's making noise, and I'm yelling at him, "Do this, get this, cut this." And at the end of the day, we were walking down the street, leaving the job, and he wanted to fight me. And I said, "What is this about?" He was from Canada, and I guess this is Indian blood. And he picked up some dirt and threw it on the ground. I said, "Oh, what's that mean?" He goes, "That means we're going to fight." I said, "No, we're not." No, we're not. And I said, "Listen, I have felt, this is where feelings and intuition comes in. I have felt the tension when we're working together. What's going on with you? What is it you don't like about me?" Boy, that opened up everything, and it bled his anger. And I practiced tough listening, one of my skills, and I'm sure yours too, in the role that you play. And I heard his complaint that the tone of voice, it wasn't just "please get this," it was "hurry up, get," I was being too, it was a panicky kitchen, right?
Right.
Um, and we clarified it, and he actually calmed down. Then he invited me upstairs to his place and showed me his artwork, and we made friends.
That's great. That's great. I think one of the hardest parts about reconciliation is the issue that I've been focusing on for the past 25 years, which is respect. It's very hard to reconcile with someone who you have little or no respect for because you wonder to yourself, why am I making the effort to reconcile with someone I don't respect? And part of my work in helping people come back together is trying to identify in each of them. I have a process I call, uh, I wrote a book called Restoring Respect, but the process is called Coaching for Respect. And literally, I'm trying to determine as a coach, as a mediator, as an alternative dispute resolution coordinator, and facilitator, I'm trying to determine if either of these two people have any respect for each other or has an unrightable wrong occurred. You may be familiar with the phrase where someone engages in a behavior that the other person finds to be so egregious that they say, you know what, I just don't care. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to work with this person anymore. And if it's their boss, wow, then it becomes extraordinarily difficult. So what I search for pretty early on in the process is, do you have any respect for this person? And what is it? What is it that you respect? And if they
Hmm.
do, then we can build upon that there. We can start to separate out the behaviors and the impact of the behaviors and see if we can find some way that the both parties will agree on behaviors that will work to support the relationship going forward. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it usually doesn't work when there's no respect anywhere for the other person.
Yes, it's one of my earliest lessons in life from my mom and my dad. You don't have to like someone, but you must respect them.
Yeah. Or in order to work effectively with them. And I often say that you can have plenty of people that you work with that you like your best buddies. That's great. But that's not necessarily the reason why you work so well together. It can help, but if you don't have any respect for them, then it's almost impossible to work with them. Almost impossible, unless you're forced. And there are some organizations like the military and paramilitary organizations where you're forced to work together with people that you have no respect for. And even there, that's extraordinarily difficult.
Yes, I think number one, I think there's a lot of money and productivity being lost. A lot of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
I saw your material and I see how impactful it is. And I think sometimes people just don't know their styles. I know you're trained in
Yeah.
styles as I am.
Right.
And
Right.
this disrespect is simply a difference in styles. And we just don't know that, and then someone comes along like you and me, a change agent, and says, you know what? You're acting in your natural way. But if you can be uncomfortable with acting temporarily in a different way and assume a different attitude,
Hmm.
the relationship dynamics will shift. And not overnight, not
Right.
immediately, and not in a big way. But those of us who are process observers can see the beginning of that shift. That's all it takes, the crack in the shell, just the
Right.
beginning of it, to realize, oh wait, I just do what I do. But what if I pause and instead of being, as we say in the disc terminology, a high dominant, pull that dominance down and
Right.
be a little humble and be a little meek and practice tough listening with things you disagree with.
Right.
This comes across to the other person who has a lower level of assertiveness, perhaps, or lower level of empathy, even feeling respected.
Yes, exactly. And once we've got a little bit of that feeling respected, then they will open up the door to the possibility that they can work more effectively with that other person. That's
Yes.
generally what I've found. And recently I had an experience. I was dealing with someone in a leadership role, very high dominant, also very high conscientious. And my research tells me, my work with the disc is that high DCs are the most toughest folks to work for because
Yes.
not only do they want you to get it done now, but they want it done perfectly. And it's really hard to work for those kind of folks.
In
And
the
so that's when I often get the call from heads of HR. Hey, can you fix this person and can you work with these two people and get them to work better together? And the high dominant and conscientious are, in my experience, are often highly intelligent. They're very intuitive in many respects, but they're also they lack the emotional intelligence for some reason. There's not a lot of emotional intelligence there. Not enough of
relatively speaking, to be fair.
yeah,
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 we don't want to say someone's stupid, but there are others who have more propensity for empathy.
yeah,
The DC pattern way back when this was a graph in its middle stages, the DC was called the creative pattern. It's the artist who's frustrated, who's never going to get to Carnegie Hall, but they're always pushing. So it's like driving fast with the dominance, with the brakes on with the C.
yes,
So
yes,
internally, and this is a generalization, of course. We know
yes,
the instrument's not clinical. Internally, they suffer internal stress and tension over their perfectionism,
yes,
mainly
yes,
because that judgmental D boss is pushing them and pushing them in ways that makes them feel bad. But through training, through the type of training that you provide regarding respect, people can learn to understand their own impulsive reactions and pause for a minute. Sometimes in conflict situations, time is our ally. There may
yes,
have been a big blow up, but people can never return to the same temperature of anger after that initial volcanic explosion afterwards. And normally there's a step down if we have the
yes.
courage to ventilate in an appropriate way and give license to the other person to ventilate without judgment. That's the trick, I think, is self-control.
I think it is too. I also find that when I am spun up by someone for example, again, this person the other day was completely being dominant with me in the way they were interacting with me. I'm a high influencer. I'm 98 out of 100, which is the highest you can be. And I'm all about the connection and the relationship. And the way he was treating me was so not about that and so just about get this done, do as I say,
Mm-hmm.
even though, quite frankly, what he wanted me to do was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I actually knew better, but he was so forceful and so insistent that it be his way. I shut down. I pushed back at first, and then I shut down. And I made it. I had a very powerful reaction. I don't want to be work with this person. I don't want to be connected with this person. And it's taken me, as you said, some time. I've had to think it through. And what I actually realized this morning after sleeping on it for 2 nights, I realized that he is so concerned about the project that we're working on working out okay, that is why he went into total dominance because he's very, very worried this thing is not going to work out and it's going to cost him a lot of money. And so I realize now why he was behaving the way he does. What's unfortunate is that he works in our field in executive coaching and leadership development. He's a leader and he just does not have the self-awareness to understand. Apparently, he doesn't have the self-awareness to understand his style and how off-putting that can be. So I've got to figure out a way. I'm going to reach out to him and because it's already kind of blown up in email but exchanges, I have to figure out a way to de-escalate this thing and help him understand that I get now where he's coming from. And my
Exactly.
hope is, yeah, my hope is that by doing that, he'll come to understand that how he behaved towards me actually was not had a negative impact on me,
Yeah.
and really made it much more difficult for us to work together. We'll see. We'll see. Not we cannot. We can only be responsible. What is it they say for our own behavior,
Yes.
but not for others. So I can only lead that horse to water and hope that he'll drink.
Yes. In terms of compatibility, I have a handout that's from the 80s research on this, which is a rather rare piece, and it shows the people and work task compatibility of the styles. If you like, I'll share that with you briefly.
I would love it.
Okay. I need to be made co host so I can have share power.
You got it. Coming in now. You should have it now.
The world of Zoom. Okay, I have it. I'm sharing, I'm pulling up, and here it is. So let's just walk through this because you have plenty of experience in this. And notice how the dots are spread out quite a bit. So DD, here we go. X is human relations, the asterisk is work task. They're only fair, good to fair working together. Why? I'll just use questions here and ask you to elucidate. Why do you think the DD combination ranks only good or fair for work and personal?
Well, typically they want to take charge. And so they're going to butt heads on who's in charge here, who's going to lead this task, who's going to get it done. And that's my experience of them. So they both want to be the lead on this thing.
Yes, but here we have a DI. And
Hmm,
look, the relationship gets a little better, it gets a little warmer
right. But the
because of the, yes,
tasks still, I think
yeah, not good.
the, the I in me wants to build relationship. And so, okay, once I figure out that he's dominant, I'm going to figure out what works for him in order. Basically, I'm going to let him be dominant.
Yes.
And I'm going to be my pleasant, friendly, warm, connected self and hope that that's enough for him to feel comfortable enough so that we become more partners rather than him just dominating me and telling me what to do.
Although the work measurement remains the same, the relationship's a
Yes.
little warmer. Here we
Yes.
have a big spread. D
Ah,
and F is excellent for work, but not so good for interpersonal. Why do you suppose?
yes. Well, I often talk about this with my participants in my programs on respectful leadership, that the dominants really love to tell people what to do. And the S's will never say no. As sustainers, supporters, the steady folks are always about how can I help you? So I like to joke that if a dominant walks into a steady's office and the steady has stacks and stacks of work on their desk, and the dominant says, I need you to do something, the steady will push that work aside, say, yes, how can I help you? They will
Yeah.
never, ever say no. So
Hmm.
what happens is the dominant realizes that's my go-to person. That's my person who will always get it done. And then that steady person never ever complains and says I'm overburdened because that would be an imposition on others. That's not the way they want to operate. And eventually what happens is they just burn out and they leave. They don't complain, they don't try to make it better, they just leave. And that's been my experience. Am I on target there?
You're right on target. Yeah. And it could vary. See, notice the conflict levels varies. It could vary depending on the temperament of the individual. This doesn't tell us everything, right? It tells us
Right,
interpersonal tendencies. So
right.
maybe this S is compliant all the time, or maybe the temperament is I'm compliant, but I'm quietly resentful too.
Uh-huh. Yep, yep.
That's why it varies. Here we have
People.
high. This is the classic conflict
Yes,
situation.
yes,
Very, very low for work and poor for human relations. So
yes.
why is that?
Well, the dominants want are they're both task oriented. However, the dominants want it to be done now. And you'll often hear them say, that's good enough. That's good enough. Let's just get it done, move it forward. Whereas the high conscientious, the C's, they're all about getting it done right, being
Hmm.
very down in the weeds, making sure everything is according to specification and follows the rules and follows the specifications. And the dominant's like, it's good enough. As there's a saying in music, good enough for jazz, good enough for government work. You may have heard those
Sure,
phrases.
sure.
And whereas, so that just blows the high C's mind. It's like, what do you mean good enough? It's got to be right. It's got to be according to the law. It's got to be according to the specifications. So no wonder the two of them are going to be very, very high conflict. It's oil and water.
It's predictable.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very interesting one. The eyes, the two guys at the two at the water cooler sharing
Yeah.
jokes about the weekend.
Oh
They're
yeah,
having a great. They have a great time together.
we
In fact,
do.
look, that X would cross that line if it could. But
Yeah,
do they get any work done?
very little. Very
Or
little.
maybe disorganized because of the high impulsiveness of the I.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then here's another one that varies: the I and the S. So, in terms of work, it's very good, the I and the S, and human relations fair. So, why do you think that?
Well, the S does not want the limelight in general. And the S is always thinking about what's best for the greater good. And are we all aligned? Are we all together? Whereas the I can sometimes be all about I and to want to be in the limelight and want to be the star of the show. And the S kind of may look at that and go, really, really, do we need that right now? That doesn't help our group, is you taking the spotlight. So that the relationship can be strained in that way, and yet they still tend to get things done because the steady kind of grits their teeth and says, "Okay, I'll put up with this showboating, and we'll just get it done."
Yes. Okay, here's another one that varies a bit: the I and the C. This is quite extreme. It looks like they get the work done pretty good, but it's a pretty cold relationship.
Oh, I tell you, I have my attorney, wonderful attorney. His name is Robert. He's been working for me for years. And when I call him up, I often say, Robert, how are you doing? I'm so I. How's it going? How's the family? How was your vacation? He has one word response for me. Fine. Now turn to page
But
342 of
yes,
this contract. It's like, oh, I don't even know if he has a family. I don't know if he ever took a vacation. All I know is he immediately wants to get down in the weeds on the legal work that he is doing for me. And so we really have no relationship whatsoever. And yet he gets stuff done. I respond to what he wants me to get done. Sometimes I miss deadlines and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we work pretty good together. If he just gives me too much data, I glaze over and I shut down.
so you have an understanding the relationship is transactional.
Yes, completely. Yes.
Good. Good. That works in certain work situations.
Yes.
Okay, here we have three that are excellent for work and for human relations. The SS, why is that so good?
Well, because they're both striving to be of service, and so they're constantly thinking, okay, what are the needs of the group? What are the needs of the other person? And they're both trying to accommodate each other, so they work quite well together. The one potential downside is they might stall because they're being so deferential to the other person that they a high dominant would say, we folks just move forward, get it done. And but the two S's might be perfectly happy going along at that pace that they have set for themselves.
That's a good observation. The S and the C, also excellent for human relations and work. Why?
Well, the S again wants to be supportive and appreciates the C, the high conscientious, for their detail orientation. Because generally speaking, when the details are right, then everything else is going to go okay. And that's what the S wants. No conflict. Let's just make sure everything's good. Everyone's aligned. So they do work well together. Again, not fast enough for the high I's and the high D's in the group, but generally speaking, they can work well together, get things done well.
You're right. The D who's pushing for the
Yep.
deadline might not
Yep.
appreciate the time being spent on the S's and C's making each other comfortable
Yes. Yes.
and framing their delivery in a polite and thoughtful way rather than short, direct commands.
Right.
And last of all, the CC, also excellent for human relations and work tasks. Why?
Right. Well, generally because they are like each other so much, they both appreciate getting down into the weeds. They both appreciate the slow, methodical study approach. They both appreciate that things need to be done properly and correctly. In engineering, that's great. In accounting, that's awesome. At the end of the day, however, the one big challenge I've seen when C's are working together is the tendency to get involved in, you've heard the phrase, analysis paralysis.
Yes,
They
exactly.
just get down in the weeds forever. And again, the high I and the high D are like, please, you guys, just get
Yeah.
it done. Just
And
move forward.
you're right. And to the degree that C is high is a tendency towards perfectionism, right?
Yes,
And that can
yes.
slow things down because not everything has to be perfect.
Right, right. Now, by the way, Frank, I've seen two C's go at it like this
Oh,
because
really?
they, yes, because, for example, I was working with an organization it was a Navy technology organization where the two high C's were both the co-leads of the organization, but they fundamentally believed that the some software they had developed. One of them believed that their software was better than the other, and vice versa. And so they had a massive fight, a public fight, which eventually turned into email wars, and to
Oh,
the point,
stop.
oh, it was tough. This whole office of 100 people, they moved their desks into two different camps. It was insane. And that's the point where I was brought in to try to mediate and calm this whole situation down. But to be honest with you, it had gotten so far, it was beyond anything I could do. And basically, very senior people had to come in and break up the whole thing because it had become intractable.
Yes. And for those people who are in those environments, when there's a breakdown, you know who I think suffers the most? The S, because
Yes,
the steadiness, because they value loyalty. They're the
right.
ones who say, when they say, I divorce, goodbye, the end, they mean it. They're not coming
Yes,
back. It's
that's
not
right.
Elizabeth Taylor remarrying the same guy. It's not. Yeah,
We may be
that's
maybe dating ourselves with that reference, but
we're, we're dating ourselves by the visual.
it's true too.
This has
This
been
is such
very,
a
very
helpful chart. This is a really helpful chart.
it helps me too because I've been interpreting this, but it's helpful to hear how you frame this in terms of how respect is measured by
Yes,
these dimensions.
yes,
I also
yes.
have another treat I from the same research batch, which is the tension, the breaking points. It's let's see, it's called the pressure limitations, possible limitations under pressure of people with high dominance.
Oh, this is great.
I'll send these to you, and we can
Thank you.
attach those below in the YouTube text as well as a link. They overstep prerogatives, they act restlessly, inspire fear in others. I think that's the most serious one. They
Yes,
could
yes,
absolutely use fear.
yes.
Well, those who have inappropriate behavior use fear.
Right, right.
Override people, blunt and sarcastic.
Yep.
They skip when they're not in the limelight. They're critical and fault finding. They're inattentive to little things. They can be dissatisfied with routine work. They need stimulation. They
Yes,
resist participation as part of a team.
yes, yes.
Isn't that
I
interesting?
I call all of these potential styles that potentially derail a career. If they continue to engage in these behaviors, they'll derail themselves. And in some organizations, if they're very senior, they might be protected until such time as it becomes so bad and there's so many egregious behaviors that the HR steps in, and that's when I get the call. It's often too late. It's often too late when I get the
Yes.
call. They've let it go too long.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to recover them.
Same here. Just a little aside, I had a client pull me in to teach on styles, and there was anger among his people. There's murmurings, It was a husband and wife team running the company.
Oh boy.
I surveyed everyone. I had separate meetings, but the owners themselves never had time. They kept putting off the one-on-one meeting, and I was dying to meet with them. Excuse me, to deliver the message that I get what's happening. I was observed what's happening, and I was waiting for that face to face to give them their money's worth and tell the owner. He was a low D and his wife was a high D. He was the front man. She was in the background. So her activity didn't show, but she was the one that was hurting feelings and practicing these disrespectful dominant behaviors. And I had to talk. He was the lead man, so I had to sit down and talk with him, but he never scheduled with me. I wanted to say, you're letting your partnership, your permissive relationship with your partner, destroy the culture. You're presenting the organization as a warm culture, a family entrenched culture, mutual support, and that's not true at all. That's not true at all. That's, you may project that, you may think that, it may look that way to you, and because we only see short events, we don't, unless we're with someone all 8 hours of the work shift. But meanwhile, his partner, who had the high D, was the one who was stepping on toes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Were you able to help them?
I was able to help the individuals that
Mm,
who participated in the interpretation and certain dyads, different sub teams, but I
yeah.
was not able to solve the big problem, which was lack of integrity at the leadership level.
Yeah. And in those family-owned businesses, very, very tough.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I was in a position to use some tough love and really put it in his face and say, you know who's screwing this business? You guys are, but not consciously. Not
right.
consciously. It's
Right.
because you're professing this great philosophy and this great culture, and the hypocrisy is throwing gasoline on the resentment, on the
Yes.
fire.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
yeah, we don't win all the time, but I think what we bring, you and me and others, is reality to the environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think
That,
so. I think so. And as my Navy buddies say, we don't have a dog in the fight. And it's a kind of crude way of saying we're outside of all of this and we can provide that objective perspective. And if we can deliver that message about what's going on in a way that they can hear it, then we might be able to move the needle for them. We might.
yes,
We
yes,
might.
yeah. If
Yeah.
we can speak in a way that they can hear, you're right.
Yes.
Let,
Yes.
let's walk through these two. The high I, inducement, Marston's original word, of course.
Yes.
Be more concerned with popularity than tangible results. Yep, got to look good. They
Yep.
oversell.
Yep.
That is really obnoxious.
Yep.
They act impulsively, heart over mind. They may be inconsistent in conclusions. They make decisions based on
Yep.
surface analysis.
Yep.
They may be unrealistic in appraising people. Yeah, they might like someone who has a really bad character
Oh
defect,
yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
they're entertaining.
Yeah.
Let's see. They're inattentive to detail. Of course, you can delegate that. Trust people indiscriminately. Yes, that's a
That's
double-edged
me.
sword.
That's
That's a
me.
double-edged sword. The counselor profile has a high I, which means they trust, but they trust to a fault.
Yes. It's true.
Yes,
That's me. That's me.
that's me too.
Do you know
But
how
I'd
many
rather
do you know
go ahead.
how many gardeners I've hired and then my wife has had to fire them because they seem like nice people and then they come in and start doing our gardening and they just don't do a good job and it's up to my wife to say, "Okay, we got to let them go." But that's I've decided my wife is the one to hire our gardeners going forward.
Good. They have difficulty planning and time expenditure because of that impulsiveness.
Yep.
They can be superficial rather than getting down to the meat of things.
Yep.
Not know the proper emphasis in business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
All over the map.
these are
All
all
over the map.
stress limitations that communicate disrespect.
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or can be perceived as disrespectful. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to discipline them because of their emotionality. They take
Right.
things so personally. You
Yes.
know, I could give you evaluations, say, you know what, Greg, when you did this presentation, it would be better if you did this. And you would probably listen to that.
Yeah.
But if you're high I, you might be sensitive to feedback or criticism.
I am a high I naturally, and I am sensitive, very highly sensitive, and I've have to learn that look for the intention, look for what they're trying to help me to do, and seek for that, and then my bristles go down. I'm not as my spines go down like the porcupine.
You don't take it personally.
Yeah, I try not
Yes, yes. I'm on a parallel path with you there. Uh,
to.
Steadiness. Let's see. Strive to maintain the status quo, take a long time to adjust, having trouble meeting deadlines, need help getting started on daily assignments, be lacking in imagination, relaxed and contented with things as they are, continue to do things the way they were always done. They may hold a grudge,
Hmm.
pretty serious, and wait for orders before acting. I just want to comment on number 8, holding a grudge, because I know people hold grudges for forever,
Yeah,
for periods of time. But the grudge hurts the person, just like we say about forgiveness, releasing us from resentment and hate. So too, a grudge it rents our mental space to the past,
correct,
right?
correct,
And
correct.
and because they're low verbal generally, they're unless they seek a ventilation source or a counselor, that grudge might permanently or indefinitely keep the relationship at a level of disrespect, an unnecessary level of disrespect.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
So, do you have any comments on the steadiness
Well,
limitation?
I think one of the big challenges with the studies it is the feeling that they don't express, that
Hmm.
they're being asked, it's continually asked to go above and beyond, and they do, and no one recognizes that, and the high dominants take advantage of it. And it can be very destructive because the S eventually, at least that's my experience, is they will shut down. They will
Hmm.
just they will not communicate. They'll shut down and or they'll just leave. They'll just
Yes.
disappear one day, and that's not good. And people go, "What happened? What happened? That everything was fine." Well, that's because no one worked with that S to help understand where they were at, and the S
Yeah.
doesn't share.
Yeah. With the S's, you have to use negative assertion. You have to say, "What is there anything wrong? Is there
Right.
anything that needs to be fixed? Is there
Yeah.
anything to make you more comfortable?" But
Right.
that, yeah, that is the problem. And last of all, compliance. Again, Marston's original word.
Right.
Lean
Now
on
it's
they lean,
conscientious. Yeah,
which describes it better in a way, I think,
I think
and
so.
and gets away from so another aspect of
Yeah.
Marston's life that we won't discuss right now.
Right.
Um, they lean on supervisors. They hesitate to act without precedent. They may be bound by procedures and methods, get bogged down in details. They resist acceptance of responsibility. They want full explanation before changes are made. They pass the buck. They yield their position to avoid controversy. They're defensive when threatened. They can be suggestible and easily led. And most of all, they have no tolerance for risk.
Mm-hmm. Very low risk tolerance, which in an insurance actuator, that's what we want. But in a different kind of organization, this can just literally cause the wheels of productivity to grind to a halt. And they may be right. They may be focused on getting things done perfectly and right and so on and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily further the goals, the overall goals of the organization. Yes, we want a high C. If we're working at NASA, and we're developing a telescope with precision instruments. Yeah, we want the C's right there helping to make sure that that thing is perfect. But
Yes.
most of us are not working at NASA. We're doing other things that don't require precision down to the 0.00 nth degree. It's not necessary. But these folks are in our lives. And what I've also found is that they think I'm wrong. They'll literally throw the book at me. They will come up with a huge book of reasons why I'm wrong and just flood me with data and information about why I'm wrong, which just as a high I is enrages me. I'm not interested in that. Help me understand, but don't flood me with so much information that you're deliberately shoving your expertise down my throat, because then I'll just resist it.
I have an idea that may help us as trainers in this regard, in that we're talking about reconciliation and respect. As we said before, often we don't know what's pissing off other people about our
Right,
style unless
right.
they tell us directly. Like my mom said to me once, "You talk too much." I didn't know if that meant I use too many words or I share too much, but I got it. Calm down.
Hmm.
Yes. So, as trainers, what I've learned, instead of just going into the situation and doing the training, whether or not it involves disc, it always involves relationship, right?
Yes.
So, I now have a new method, especially after that bad experience of the person hiring me not willing to listen to feedback about their own profile.
Hmm.
Fix everyone else, Frank. Change everyone. You're the people mechanic. Change everyone. But no, no, we can't get close. No, no, no. I'm paying you. I'm the boss. So I think in terms of program design, and there's some excellent resources on transformational program design I'll share with you later. But it involves warning the people that for them to get the best out of this type of training, they must be willing to face the thing we fear, which is change.
Hmm.
We'd rather be comfortable with the pain than not. You know, it reminds me of the old story of the man with his banjo on the porch and the bloodhounds laying on the floor of the porch and he's wailing and the guest says, "Why is the dog wailing?" He says, "Oh, he's laying on a bed now." He says, "Why does he move?" "Oh, it doesn't hurt enough yet." So I warn people now with new programs that some of their behaviors are naturally going to conflict with others. We're not perfect puzzle pieces that fit together, and God bless that, because if we
Yep.
didn't have differences, we would have indifference.
Yep. Yep. Great way to
So,
put it.
so in the what I call the pre-course setup, I remind them that when they look at their style, they may say, "Yeah, that's pretty much me," but also that pretty much me is pretty much fixed too, unless
Yeah.
there's a significant emotional event that
Right.
shifts
Right.
values in a person, which changes the
Right.
personality. You're pretty much stuck with being who you are. So that means for you to get along in a respectful way with others, it means restraint of some of your natural behaviors.
Mhm. Or adaptation. Adaptation
Adaptation, and in the
to
workshop, some role playing, but let them know it's we we can't just we can't just go through society like a bowling ball through pins, you know,
right.
just
Right.
doing whatever we feel like. We need to develop a different sensitivity, a different sensibility about people reading, and I think that's the strength in what you're doing with respect, because I don't know what irritates the other person unless they feed back to me. And if they're not going to feed back to me, particularly if they're high S type, I need to actively use negative assertion. Go, what's not
Hmm.
working in this relationship? What's working? What's not working? And what maintains the status quo? And
Right.
that has totally changed the way I design and begin training programs.
I love it. I love it. Me too. I talk about what I call the one third rule. And I say one third of you in this program, you're really excited to be here. And I appreciate that very much. Then there's a second third. You're a little skeptical about all of this. You're not sure this is a little out of the box, but you're going to give it a shot. And then there's the last third who would rather be having root canal than be in this program right now. And I say, look, I understand it. I've been in those kind of programs too. That's the last thing I want you to think about this program, that this is a place that you hate and there's no value to you. So my job is to make sure that what I have to offer is useful to you. And even if it may not be useful in your work, maybe someday someone in your family comes to you and says, I'm being treated with disrespect at work and I don't know what to do. And maybe there's something you learned in this workshop that might be helpful to you. 9 times out of 10, that last third kind of tilt their heads and they go, okay, all right, I'll give this a chance when I say those things. So it really is, as you say, the preparation in advance for coming into the program, the willingness to consider the possibility.
Yes, yes, we provide opportunities. We're not just information providers, but
Right,
we provide an opportunity for people
right.
to apply some of the suggestions that come out of the work that we do.
Yes, yes.
Very
And
good.
with that, I want to say thank you so much for doing this. This has been so helpful to me. I really, truly appreciate your coming up with this wonderful idea.
Yeah, it's been great. Well, as soon as I saw your piece online about reconciliation, for some reason that seems to be in the mainstream of my consciousness lately, both in personal life and in business,
Yeah,
and for good reason and with good results. So I instantly thought we could have a good conversation on reconciliation. And then learning that we're both experts in styles, I thought, oh, now we're ahead of the game. We
yeah,
can have a we can have a conversation that benefits those who are not familiar
right.
with this process of positive personal change. So I am honored to be here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for inviting me for this good conversation.
And thank you too. I've really learned a lot from you, Frank. Thanks.